little baguettes, welcome to l'Académie Équilibre, and today we're doing a really important tense, that is le futur simple. So let's begin. Now it's pretty obvious, as the name suggests, we're talking about the future. But what kind of future? It is your simple future. If we look at the timeline, right, you will notice that over here you have your present. And if we go here in the future, you will find two types of future, that is futur proche and futur simple. Now we've already done futur proche and we know that talks about your near future. Near as in something that's going to happen in a few hours, maybe a few minutes, as in I'm going to the market. And then we have the simple future, something that we also have in English. For instance, if I say I will go to the market, that is your far future. Alright, in both situations, I'm talking about the market, right? But the first one tells me that I'm going to the market pretty soon. But the second one, maybe I will go tomorrow, right? Maybe next week, maybe next month. So future simple talks about the events of the future that will happen not very soon, somewhere far in the future. Right, now the question is, how do we conjugate it? We already know how to conjugate future proche. Now we come to how do we conjugate future simple in French. That is your formation, la formation. Now, as the name suggests, the conjugation or the formation is pretty simple, right? It's a simple future. First thing that you need to know that it will only have one verb, right? Like how in passé composé we have two verbs. One is your helping verb and one is your past participle. Or how in future proche you had aller and the infinitive, right? So there also you had two verbs. But when we talk about future simple, you will have only and only one verb that you need to conjugate. And the formation is pretty simple. What is the first step? First things first, we're going to take the verb, right, as it is as in the infinitive form, which is also known as its non-conjugated form. As in, we know that we have three groups of verbs, er, ir and re. So as long as it is in its er, ir, re form, we call it an infinitive. Okay, you got the verb. Next, what we're going to do with it? We're going to add avoir endings to it. Okay, our second step is to add avoir endings. And that is the most crucial step over here. Now, before we add avoir endings, you need to know what exactly do avoir endings mean. It is nothing but the conjugation of avoir in the present tense. That is, j'ai, tu as, il, elle a, nous avons, vous avez, ils, elles ont. Okay? And from here, that is the conjugation of avoir in the present tense, we're going to extract the avoir endings. So with je, you get ai, tu, you get as, il, elle, it is a, and here you have to pay attention. We're talking about ending, so we're only going to take the ons part, ez part, and ont as it is. So then what is our formation? To write a sentence in future simple, you need your subject, that is your sujet, then your verb, which we're going to break down into infinitive. When we're talking about future simple as a tense, we also call it the future stem. Then the second part of the verb is your avoir endings. Then you have your rest of the sentence, or what we call the objet, object. Now we'll just take an example to understand how do we really conjugate a verb. So if I have my verb finir, that is to finish. So I want to say I will finish my homework tomorrow. Now, as you'll see, it is pretty easy to conjugate in future simple. You'll take the verb, it will be given to you in the bracket. Okay, and that makes our job easier because generally in the bracket, you're already given the infinitive form. So we don't really have to do anything. So I'll take finir as it is, no modifications, and I will add my avoir endings. Which avoir ending will I add depends on my subject in the sentence. So here it is je, and the je, what do we add? We add ai. That is, demain, je finirai mon devoir. Tomorrow, I will finish my homework. Now, we'll take an example to see how do we do it with every single subject. That is, if I have the verb parler, to speak. So, if I want to conjugate it with every single subject, first thing, I'll write parler as it is, with all of them. Now, I will add avoir ending according to the subject. That is, with je, I will add ai. That is, je parlerai. With tu, I will add es, tu parleras. With et, il parlera. Nous parlerons. Vous parlerez. And finally, elles parleront. Okay, so that's how easy it is. Now, so far we talked about ER verbs. How do we do it? We talked about IR verbs. Now we come to RE verbs. Now here there's a bit of a twist. That is, we modify the infinitive up a little bit. So make sure you note this, pause and note it. So with RE verbs, we're going to remove the E at the end, right? That is before you add the avoir endings. What does that mean? So if I have my verb attendre, for example, to wait. Okay, until now what were we doing? We were taking the infinitive as it is. But when we talk about this, we will remove this extra E. So whenever you see an RE verb, be it regular, be it irregular, you're going to remove the E at the end. So the future stem, right, we saw that the future stem and the infinitive were more or less the same thing. But when we talk about RE verbs, the infinitive is attendre, right? But the future stem is attendre, that is no E over there. So what do I get? J'attendrai. Tu attendras. And this is my answer. I will wait, you will wait, right? They will wait, like that. And so this is my final answer. Now, so far, future sampler was mostly a piece of cake, right? It's a pretty simple process. But the real deal is exceptions. That is, this tense has a total of 21 exceptions that you need to know in order to ace future sampler. So let's come to the list then. So what do I mean when I say a verb is an exception in future sampler? Is basically that the future stem is not the same as the infinitive. So far what were we doing? We were taking the verb in its infinitive form and adding avoir endings to it. Now here also when we talk about exceptions, we're still going to be adding avoir endings, but the only difference is that the future stem will be an exception. So for example, my first verb is avoir. And what is its future stem? It is or. That means whatever avoir endings I will add it to this. Then there's faire, which becomes faire. For example, I will do becomes je ferai. Next you have être, which becomes ser, like tu seras. Then you have venir, which becomes viendre. And similar to that is tenir, which follows the same pattern, that is venir becomes viendre, so tenir becomes tiendre. It means to hold in English. Then we have vouloir, to want, which becomes voudre. Like nous voudrons, we will want. I'm just giving random examples to understand how each future stem goes with the avoir endings of different subjects. Then you've got voir, to see, which becomes ver. And then you have envoyer, to send, which becomes envers. Which is why I've written voir and envoyer together, because their future stems are somewhat similar. Ninth one is aller, to go. And the future stem is just ir. So whatever you add to this. Like j'irai, I will go. Or vous irez, you will go. For the 10th one, we have savoir. That is to know, and this is the future stem. Then there's recevoir, to receive, which becomes recevre. Similar to it is apercevoir. This means to notice or to glimpse. Another with the same pattern is pleuvoir. This becomes pleuvra. Il pleuvra. It is only conjugated with il because it is an impersonal verb, that is, it rains. You can't say I rain, he, she rains. So here il stands for it will rain. Then you've got mourir, to die, and this is the future stem. M-O-U-R-R. Next is cueillir. Here the only difference is that you change the I from the infinitive to E, and then you add whatever avoir endings you have to. Next one is valoir, and this one becomes votre. Now be very careful here. When we talk about vouloir, they look very similar, but this one is a O and here it's a A when we talk about valoir, to be worth. Then we have devoir, which is to must, and this one becomes devre. Again, this is similar to these three. So for instance, je devrais courir, that is to run, and this one becomes cours with the double R. 19th is your falloir, that is to be necessary, and this one becomes faudre. And here again, this is an impersonal verb, so it will only be conjugated with il, as in il faudra. That is, it will be necessary that whatever. 20th is pouvoir, to can, to be able to, and this one becomes pour, double R, be careful about that. And our last verb is s'asseoir, which is your pronominal verb, to sit down. So because this is a pronominal verb, whichever subject you conjugate it with, you have to change the pronoun according to it. So now there are two variations of that. Either you can use or asseoir. So if I want to say we will sit down, I get nous nous asseoirons. So this was our list. Now I'll just tell you the most important verbs in this list. First one, avoir. Obviously we're going to talk about the most common verbs, so you should know them. Avoir, être, faire, venir, and sometimes they will ask tenir just to check your extent of knowledge. Then vouloir, again important one, voir, important one, envoyer, aller, savoir, these are really important ones, right? Then you have devoir is another important one, and pouvoir and valoir. So these are your most important ones. You'll see in the beginning I've circled almost everything. That is because I started with the most important ones. Now here I've told you how the system works, but your job is to memorize each and every future stem to know all 21 of the exceptions. Otherwise, future sample is a very simple tense, and once you've got the exceptions on your fingertips, you're basically sorted. Alright, this was our future sampler. I hope the video was beneficial for you. Thank you so much.